Okay, there we go. Cool. All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome all of you who are joining on Zoom. Welcome all of you who are joining us on Facebook and YouTube. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, everyone. We're still admitting people, but we're starting on time like we promised. So with that being said, who would like to say the opening prayer? We are going to share the screen so you can read off. Please let me know if there's issues seeing this, Jeremiah.
No, we see it. It's fine.
Okay, wonderful. Jeremiah, actually, could you say the opening prayer for today?
Oh my God, thou seest me in my lowliness and weakness, occupied with the greatest undertaking, determined to raise thy word among the masses and to spread thy teachings among thy peoples. How can I succeed unless thou assist me with the breath of the Holy Spirit? Help me to triumph by the hosts of thy glorious kingdom, and shower upon me thy confirmations, which alone can change a gnat into an eagle, a drop of water into rivers and seas, and an atom into lights and suns. O my Lord, assist me with thy triumphant and effective might, so that my tongue may utter thy praises and attributes among all the people, and my soul overflow with the wine of thy love and knowledge. Thou art the omnipotent and the doer of whatsoever thou willest.
Welcome, everyone, for this session of Advent and Divine Justice. We are moving forward again today, and we have a very beautiful presentation thanks to Mr. Ehsan Bayat, and we're going to go through it today and get through these few paragraphs for the day as we speak. Let's pull up, excuse me. We're going to read, Jeremiah, which paragraphs for today?
4 through 9.
We're going to read paragraphs 4 through 9. And as you all may know, there's different ways to read. And one of the methods, you can utilize something called Ocean 2.0 Interfaith Reader. And we have that pulled up so that all of you can see how it works. As we've already pulled up to Advent and Divine Justice within the reader, we're going to press play and it's going to read the passages. And afterward, we're all going to individually read the passages together like normal. So here we are.
These recurrent crises, which with ominous frequency and resistless force are afflicting an ever-increasing portion of the human race, must of necessity continue, however impermanently, to exercise in a certain measure their baleful influence upon a world community which has spread its ramifications to the uttermost ends of the earth. How can the beginnings of a world upheaval, unleashing forces that are so gravely deranging the social, the religious, the political, and the economic equilibrium of organized society, throwing into chaos and confusion political systems, racial doctrines, social conceptions, cultural standards, religious associations, and trade relationships? How can such agitations on a scale so vast, so unprecedented, fail to produce any repercussions on the institutions of a faith of such tender age, whose teachings have a direct and vital bearing on each of these spheres of human life and conduct? Little wonder, therefore, if they who are holding aloft the banner of so pervasive a faith, so challenging a cause, find themselves affected by the impact of these world-shaking forces. Little wonder if they find that in the midst of this whirlpool of contending passions, their freedom has been curtailed, their tenets contemned, their institutions assaulted, their motives maligned, their authority jeopardized, their claim rejected. In the heart of the European continent, a community which, as predicted by Abdu'l-Bahá, is destined by virtue of its spiritual potentialities and geographical situation to radiate the splendor of the light of the faith on the countries that surround it, has been in Central Asia, in the city enjoying the unique distinction of having been chosen.
It skipped. It skipped. Has been momentarily eclipsed through the restrictions.
Through the restrictions which a regime that has sorely misapprehended its purpose and function has chosen to impose upon it. Its voice, alas, is now silenced, its institutions dissolved, its literature banned, its archives confiscated, and its meetings suspended. In Central Asia, in the city enjoying the unique distinction of having been chosen by Abdu'l-Bahá as the home of the first Mashraq al-Asghar of the Baha'i world, as well as in the towns and villages of the province to which it belongs, the sore-pressed faith of Baha'u'llah, as a result of the extraordinary and unique vitality which in the course of several decades it has consistently manifested, finds itself at the mercy of forces which, alarmed at its rising power, are now bent on reducing it to utter impotence. Its temple, though still used for purposes of Baha'i worship, has been expropriated, its assemblies and committees disbanded, its teaching activities crippled, its chief promoters deported, and not a few of its most enthusiastic supporters, both men and women, imprisoned. In the land of its birth, wherein reside the immense majority of its followers, a country whose capital has been hailed by Baha'u'llah as the mother of the world and the dayspring of the joy of mankind, a civil authority, as yet undivorced officially from the paralyzing influences of an antiquated, a fanatical, and outrageously corrupt clergy, pursues relentlessly its campaign of repression against the adherents of a faith which it has for well nigh a century striven unsuccessfully to suppress. Indifferent to the truth that the members of this innocent and proscribed community can justly claim to rank as among the most disinterested, the most competent, and the most ardent lovers of their native land. Contemptuous of their high sense of world citizenship, which the advocates of an excessive and narrow nationalism can never hope to appreciate. Such an authority refuses to grant to a faith which extends its spiritual jurisdiction over well nigh 600 local communities, and which numerically outnumbers the adherents of either the Christian, the Jewish, or the Zoroastrian faiths in that land, the necessary legal right to enforce its laws, to administer its affairs, to conduct its schools, to celebrate its festivals, to circulate its literature, to solemnize its rites, to erect its edifices, and to safeguard its endowments. And now, recently, in the Holy Land itself, the heart and nerve center of a world-embracing faith, the fires of racial animosity, of fratricidal strife, of unabashed terrorism have lit a conflagration that gravely interferes, on the one hand, with that flow of pilgrims that constitutes the lifeblood of that center, and suspends on the other the various projects that had been initiated in connection with the preservation and extension of the areas surrounding the sacred spots it enshrines. The safety of the small community of resident believers faced by the rising tide of lawlessness has been imperiled. Its status as a neutral and distinct community indirectly challenged, and its freedom to carry out certain of its observances curtailed. A series of murderous assaults, alternating with outbursts of bitter fanaticism, both racial and religious, involving the leaders as well as the followers of the three leading faiths in that distracted country, have at times threatened to sever all normal communications, both within its confines as well as with the outside world. Perilous though the situation has been, the Baha'i holy places, the object of the adoration of a world-encircling faith, have, notwithstanding their number and exposed position, and though to outward seeming deprived of any means of protection, been vouchsafed a preservation little short of miraculous. A world torn with...
All right. So we have now seen what we're going to be reading today. We've seen these paragraphs, very, very, very substantive. So today we'll be looking at paragraphs 4 through 9 and the impact of upheavals on the Baha'i community. And in particular, this third session, we're going to discuss the upheavals in the Baha'i community and really reflect upon the struggle of the early Baha'i community of North America. How could anyone doubt that the guardianship was not divinely inspired guidance for the entire world, especially with the constant uncertainty in general that was pervasive throughout this entire world, let alone the difficulties heaped upon the Baha'i community, as we've just looked at shortly right now. We will see the tough tests and trials that the Guardian has outlined. And we're going to be reading again through these paragraphs 4 through 9. And we will be examining how this reality was in the time that this was written. Paragraph 4. If we could have one of our friends here attending to read this first paragraph 4. Dear Alice, would you like to read this paragraph?
Is it the same as in the book?
Yes, paragraph 4.
Okay. I'll do my best.
All right. Thank you.
These reoccurring crises, which with onity frequencies and resistant force, the affliction, the evil, the ever-increasing portion of the human race must of necessity continue, however impermanent, to exercise in a certain measure their baleful influence upon the world community, which has spread to ramification to the utmost end of the earth. How can the beginning of a world upheaves, upleasing force that are so gravely derailing the social, the religion, the political, the economic, the equilibrium of organization, society, organized society throw into chaos and confuse political system, race doctrines, social conception, cultural standards, religion association, the trade relationship. How can much allegation on a scale so vast, so unprecedented, fail to produce any repercussion on the institution of a faith of such tender age, whom teaching has a direct and vital bearing on each of these spheres of human life and conduct?
So this is a very powerful paragraph. So as we start this paragraph, these recurrent crises with ominous frequency and resistless force. So recurrent crises, these crises that keep occurring again, recurrent, again and again, with ominous frequency. Ominous refers to the future. And if I can define, let's see here. Define ominous. Oops. Define ominous. Giving the impression that something bad or unpleasant is going to happen, threatening. So this use of the word ominous that the Guardian has provided us, this future of something bad happening with ominous frequency, that this resistless force is going to continue afflicting an ever-increasing portion of the human race, and that it's going to continue. So from the very beginning, Shoghi Effendi is clearly saying that this is going to continue and there will be no one to resist it, and it's going to keep occurring again and again. And then it says, how can the beginnings of a world upheaval unleashing forces that are so gravely deranging the social, the religious, the political, and the economic equilibrium of organized society? So this social, the religious, the political, the economic, the equilibrium in all these spheres of society are becoming gravely deranged, throwing them into chaos, throwing political, it says, throwing into chaos and confusion political systems, racial doctrines, social conceptions, cultural standards, religious associations, and trade relationships, throwing them into confusion and chaos. And then Shoghi Effendi asks the question. Alice, could you ask this question again after the pause? How can? So the question here, how can?
Oh, how can such agitation on a scale so vast, so unpractical, fail to produce any repercussion on the institution of a faith of such tender age, whom teaching has a direct and vital bearing on each of these spheres of human life and conduct?
That is amazing. Based off what Shoghi Effendi has just said in the paragraph until this question, the question that we are reading here is to a large extent rhetorical. It's a question that's on its face, the answer given prior. And what's amazing about this is that even though we can go further into this just by reviewing the first part of this paragraph as the answer to that question, you are able to recognize the futility of something that contradicts this, given all the insurmountable evidence for these repercussions on the institutions of the Baha'i faith of such tender age, whose teachings have a direct and vital bearing on each of these spheres of human life and conduct. So Shoghi Effendi, in the first part of the paragraph, responds to how the institutions of the Baha'i faith are going to be negatively affected by all of these crises around us. A direct answer to this rhetorical question that's asked after, so that one can reflect on what was just said. And then he, going on in the next paragraphs, he continues and explains further. So paragraph 5, if we could have someone to read this. Let's see, from our dear friends here. Oops, let me go back. Who of our dear friends would like to read this next paragraph, please? Jeremiah, would you be able to read this?
Yeah. Little wonder, therefore, if they who are holding aloft the banner of so pervasive faith, so challenging a cause, find themselves affected by the impact of these world-shaking forces. Little wonder if they find that in the midst of this whirlpool of contending passions, their freedom has been curtailed, their tenets contemned, their institutions assaulted, their motives maligned, their authority jeopardized, their claim rejected.
Jeremiah, if you could, that was condemned, I think. That's a typo, I believe, right?
I'll have to double check it against the.
Okay. So the paragraph here to reflect on, little wonder, therefore, if they who are holding aloft the banner of so pervasive a faith, so challenging a cause, find themselves affected by the impact of these world-shaking forces. So having described these institutions in that rhetorical question, we're now left to, again, little wonder. Little thought goes into this if you recognizing the institutions are going to be affected, that the individuals that are a part of this society, they too would be affected. It is very logical to see this, that the individuals themselves would be impacted by these world-shaking forces. That in the next sentence, in the midst of this whirlpool of contending passions, their freedom has been curtailed, tenets condemned, their institutions assaulted, their motives maligned, their authority jeopardized, their claim rejected. As we're all aware, with the Baha'is of Iran, there was a campaign recently by the Baha'i international community released that on social media, people share hashtag stop hate propaganda. And this is in direct response to the increasing fervor of people in the land, the cradle of the Baha'i faith today, that are spreading misinformation, spreading lies, indoctrinating the people of that land, so that with great prejudice, they treat Baha'is, the people who believe in the cause of God, they treat Baha'is with such inhumanity, with such disgrace, and not affording any Baha'i the means to respond. So this is very, very real today. But again, Shoghi Effendi is describing this in the 30s. As we go into the 40s, and we know that the 1900s was by no means beautiful either for the world. The Advent of Divine Justice, paragraph 6. Now, could we please have a beautiful or handsome reader to read for us? Anyone who hasn't read yet, you are very welcome, please. Let's see.
Okay, I'll read, Jean.
Beautiful. Thank you, dear. Thank you.
In the heart of the European continent, a community which, as predicted by Abdu'l-Baha, is destined by virtue of its spiritual potentialities and geographical situation to radiate the splendor of the light of the faith on the countries that surround it, has been momentarily eclipsed through the restrictions which a regime that has sorely misapprehended its purpose and function has chosen to impose upon it. Its voice, alas, is now silenced, its institutions dissolved, its literature banned, its archives confiscated, and its meetings suspended.
So does everyone remember what year the Advent and Divine Justice was published?
1938.
1938. And this was revealed on Christmas Day. It was released on Christmas Day, 1938. Amazing. So Europe is steeped in this darkness. Now, you think when you look at this, it could be Iran, but it's now, as we all realize, throughout the ages, as the world, as Shoghi Effendi described the previous paragraphs, this tumult that's being found around the world is similarly going to result in similar results for the Baha'is in countries where this tumult is greatest. Now, what can we see as the country this is referring to, or a series of countries or continent? Which continent is this one paragraph referring to now?
Well, he's talking about Europe, but he's talking about a country. Is he talking about a country or just,
No, Europe.
Oh.
Yes, it's Europe. So this is the continent of Europe. And at this time, the continent of Europe before World War II, as Europe went into World War II in 1939. And correct me if I'm wrong, please, everyone. Right?
Yeah, the next couple of slides are going to start to get into the stage, which is set for World War II.
So we know that it's gradually, however fast it was, really descending into a very dark place.
But I don't think all of Europe was it was banned. Are they talking about Germany? Because it wasn't banned in all of Europe, but this is when the Nazis started gaining power. So maybe they're talking about Germany.
Maybe they are.
I don't think the other countries in Europe put on restrictions.
Well, the proxy war that began in Spain and some other regions of Europe, it makes me wonder about how we define things. But this, as you had mentioned, is definitely referring to the rise of Nazism, fascism, as you had Mussolini's Italy, and other movements. You had, why am I forgetting from Spain, the dictator there? They had a very, very terrible civil war, the Spanish.
Yeah, I know. I don't remember the name, but yeah.
Paragraph 7. Would you be able to kindly read this paragraph 7?
I can read.
Yes, please.
In Central Asia, in the city enjoying the unique distinction of having been chosen by Abdu'l-Baha as the home of the first Mashriq Azkar in the Baha'i world, as well as in the towns and villages of the province to which it belongs, the sore-pressed faith of Baha'u'llah, as a result of the extraordinary and unique vitality which, in the course of several decades, it has consistently manifested, finds itself at the mercy of forces which, alarmed at its rising power, are now bent on reducing it to utter impotence. Its temple, though still used for purposes of Baha'i worship, has been expropriated, its assemblies and committees disbanded, its teaching activities crippled, its chief promoters deported, and not a few of its most enthusiastic supporters, both men and women, imprisoned.
Amazing. Does anyone know what the word Mashwal Atkar means?
something about the rising of dawn. It's the house of worship.
Yes, yes. It's a dawning.
The place where dawn prayers, the place where dawn prayers are said.
Yes, that's also good. Let's see. Mashrik or Askar. Let's see. It is the dawning place of the remembrance of God.
Here.
The dawning place of the remembrance of God. That is the definition, the label in English. I looked that up to make sure I said it correctly. The paragraph we're seeing here, can you tell me which country was this Mashkul Asghar located in? The Baha'i temple, the Baha'i community that this paragraph is speaking to.
That would have been Russia.
They were called the Soviet Union, the USSR.
Yeah.
And they, as one of the member states, had taken what is now currently known as Turkmenistan. And the city of Ashgabat, it was called the city of love. And this travesty, even though we all know about what the USSR and the Soviet Union was about roughly, we know that one of the central tenets of communism and the countries that had used that as its banner was the complete disavowalment of religion. And the Baha'i faith and its properties was considered a religious property, a religious movement, a religious group. So very clearly, the people who had for some time been a minority, not wishing these institutions to exist, period, due to whatever reasoning they had, with the government in charge, realizing that this in fact is the new law, that religion not be practiced, it was only a matter of time before these institutions would be forced, as virtue of the situation, be forced to no longer exist. We have paragraph 8.
I'll read it, John.
All right.
In the land of its birth, wherein reside the immense majority of its followers, a country whose capital has been held by Baha'u'llah as the mother of the world and the dayspring of the joy of mankind, a civil authority as yet undivorced officially from the paralyzing influences of an antiquated, a fanatical, and outrageously corrupt clergy, pursues relentlessly its campaign of repression against the adherents of a faith which it has for well nigh a century striven unsuccessfully to suppress. Indifferent to the truth that the members of this innocent and prescribed community can justly claim to rank as among the most disinterested, the most competent, and the most ardent lovers of their native land, contemptuous of their high sense of world citizenship, which the advocates of an excessive and narrow nationalism can never hope to appreciate. Such an authority refuses to grant to a faith which extends its spiritual jurisdiction over well nigh 600 local communities, and which numerically outnumbers the adherents of either the Christian, the Jewish, or the Zoroastrian faiths in that land, the necessary legal right to enforce its laws, to administer its affairs, to conduct its schools, to celebrate its festivals, to circulate its literature, to solemnize its rites, to erect its edifices, and to safeguard its endowments. We're talking about Iran here, right?
Yes, I had to unmute myself. Yes. So in the land of its birth, Iran, Baha'u'llah, when he describes the mother of the world, this is Tehran. Tehran is the capital of Iran that has been hailed by Baha'u'llah as the mother of the world and the dayspring of the joy of mankind. And I believe there are other sources, it says the light of the world as well. And describing in a very short way to put this simply, the clergy and the state were not divorced from each other. The clergy was the powerful institution that, again, as Shoghi Effendi described, with its paralyzing influences of a fanatical and outrageously corrupt clergy, pursues relentlessly its campaign of repression against the adherents of a faith, the Baha'i faith, which it has for well nigh a century striven unsuccessfully to suppress. So Shoghi Effendi very directly not just condemns the progress of the Iranian people in divorcing themselves, their government, their civil authorities, from these outrageous forces, as he says, the outrageously corrupt clergy. But he also goes on to say, indifferent to the truth, that the members of this innocent and prescribed community can justly claim to rank as among the most disinterested, the most competent, and the most ardent lovers of their native land. Speaking to the Bahá'ís and their innocence and their desire to be active and productive citizens in their country, he, again, having the explanation that the Baha'i faith is the largest minority next to Islam in the land of the Baha'i faith's birth, he talks about the necessary legal right to enforce its laws, to administer its affairs, to conduct its schools, to celebrate its festivals, to circulate its literature, to solemnize its rights, marital rights and death rights, to erect its edifices, and to safeguard its endowments. This authority, the government, refuses to grant the Baha'is its spiritual jurisdiction over these affairs. And these affairs, by virtue of being illegal, really hindered the Baha'i community and continues to this day to hinder the Baha'i community when you're refused even a license to work in Iran today. You're refused to go to school because you're a Baha'i, believing that you, again, have to be honest of your belief, and when you are directly asked by the government what is your religion and your identification to live in that country, you say you're a Baha'i, you are blacklisted, you are removed from your schooling, the teachers are informed and actively told to harass you and to educate the students wrongfully on your beliefs and then deny you the right to defend yourself. All of these things are sadly happening today. Now, the last paragraph that we're viewing for today, paragraph 9. Can we please have someone who would like to read this paragraph? It'd be very appreciated. For some reason, I'm trying to look at people's names and it's very difficult. There we go. Let's see. Miss Jean Crawford, did you read for today, or would you like to?
I did read. If no one else wants to, I could read again or give somebody else a chance. Should I go ahead and do it?
Yeah, why not? Let's do it.
And now recently in the Holy Land itself, the heart and nerve center of a world-embracing faith, The fires of racial animosity, of fratricidal strife, of unabashed terrorism have lit a conflagration that gravely interferes on the one hand with that flow of pilgrims that constitutes the lifeblood of that center, and suspends on the other the various projects that had been initiated in connection with the preservation and extension of the area surrounding the sacred spots it enshrines. The safety of the small community of resident believers faced by the rising tide of lawlessness has been imperiled, its status as a neutral and distinct community indirectly challenged, and its freedom to carry out certain of its observations curtailed. A series of murderous assaults, alternating with outbursts of bitter fanaticism, both racial and religious, involving the leaders as well as the followers of the three leading faiths in that distracted country, have at times threatened to sever all normal communications, both within its confines as well as with the outside world. Perilous though the situation has been, the Baha'i holy places, the object of the adoration of a world-encircling faith, have, notwithstanding their number and exposed position, and though to outward seeming deprived of any means of protection, been vouchsafed a preservation little short of miraculous.
Amazing. So what can we reflect off of this passage? Hi, Alice. Do you have an idea?
My idea is always prayer. From what I read of Shoghi Effendi, he talks about we are pathetic because we have failed to move away from God, and anything that God has set up, we're gonna win, but we have to be steadfast and we have to stay focused on the will of God. And I don't believe that God has started this faith and it's gonna fail, but we're gonna see all kinds of calamities. We're gonna have things in our lives that show up and give us tests. And I think the one thing that sometimes I hear Baha'i say, oh, the Baha'i is going to be your test. And I don't think at this point of our life right now, we should be talking about testing each other. We should be united in prayer and doing whatever we can to bring about what has been set out. Shoghi Effendi has worked so hard to put this in place in writing for us, that unless we stop, then I don't think it'll fail even if I stop. If I left the faith today, it's still gonna go on because God will rise up someone to do the work. So we just got to be willing to do the work, encourage one another, and we have a well-written plan. So with a lot of prayer, united and doing what we're supposed to do, it will come about. I don't think we know exactly how that's going to happen, but God knows exactly how it's going to happen when we do our part and keep the faith.
It's a good point, Alice, because really, what's the alternative? If the faith, the Baha'is in the faith are truly the plan for the faith is the only course in reality, whether the world recognizes it and understands it at this point.
And looking at this passage about this in the Holy Land, the strife that had been happening in Palestine, modern day Israel, the strife and the confusion and the tumult that was happening in the Holy Land at the time that Shoghi Effendi was writing this, to be a capstone to all of this that was happening around the world at the time, it only shows how a miracle it is that this faith has, despite all that has been leagued against it, all that has been heaped on top of it, all that has been attempted to put out its light, it is growing, it is continuing to burn, and it is spreading like we do not understand. Not in a way that we understand. Especially
Alapa, John.
yes.
John, it's Ehsan. It's Ehsan. Hope you're doing well, John.
Alapa.
John, just 2 seconds. In paragraph 9, the beloved guardian here is addressing the problems that are going on in Palestine, as you mentioned very clearly. And the reason why the beloved guardian is bringing this point up is because this is not only is this where the world center of the faith is, but it's also he's bringing this up because this is the reason that he's also not in the world center. And as you recall, he's wrote this great letter from Europe. He actually had to leave the world center in Palestine because of the world encircling trials and tribulations. And this one, namely, at that point in time, was the rise of Nazism. The Mufti of Jerusalem supported Nazism, and they were the Nazis were coming for the head of the beloved guardian, and so they were ready to move in. And you'll be seeing this in forthcoming slides. That dear lady, she was absolutely spot on when she mentioned Germany in the earlier paragraph. It's talking, and you mentioned Europe. Yes, absolutely. This is talking directly about Germany and the rise of Nazism. So yes, all of these are world encircling trials and tribulations in these early paragraphs that the beloved guardian is addressing, talking about how is this small, meager faith, as you mentioned, dear John, suddenly caught up in this maelstrom, a maelstrom of trials and tribulations, but still it is overcoming all of them. Excellent. Carry on, dear John. You're doing excellent. Thank you.
So in the paragraphs 4 through 9, the beloved guardian describes how the violent forces released throughout the world upheaval throw every aspect of ordinary human life into chaos and confusion, and exert their influence, though temporary, on the Baha'i community. Now, as to restriction, harassment, persecution, and limitations, the beloved guardian mentions restrictions imposed on the faith in Germany, harassment of the Baha'is in Ashgabat, persecution of the Baha'is in Persia, limitations experienced by the small Baha'i community in the Baha'i World Center as a result of religious and racial animosity and hatred. And that is the Baha'i World Center in Haifa, in Akka, and the holy sites. So as we discussed throughout the paragraphs, speaking now, major key points. The crises that were afflicting a large proportion of humanity with tremendous force in the 1930s signaled the beginning of a world upheaval. And Abdu'l-Baha has attributed great importance to Germany. The rise of Nazis and the World War that followed significantly impeded the advancement of European Baha'i communities. And this was described in paragraphs 4 through 9. So here we have images of the rise of Nazism, which was very, very, very much so pervasive in Nazi Germany. The Nazis, they walked in to Austria and they were welcomed. They didn't even fight. They were welcomed into Austria. Poland, which starts eventually this world war that comes after the writing of this this passage that we are reading. Poland, there was no military defense whatsoever. The Germans and the Russians ran right in up to the middle. The whole of Europe was ablaze with this fire of fascism.
John, just a quick point on this. Nazism, David Langlis gives an excellent talk. It's on YouTube. And he talks about Nazism and the Baha'i faith. And in his talk, it's in the first few minutes, David Langlis very clearly and explicitly states that the ideals put forth by Nazism is absolutely diametrically opposed to what the faith stands for. So in every aspect. And so it's an excellent talk. I encourage all the listeners to to listen to that talk, because you can see the rise of Nazism. It is completely opposed to anything that the faith stands for. Nazism is heightened nationalism. The faith is about all about the oneness of humanity and working towards an ever-advancing civilization. The faith stands for inclusive diversity. Nazism is about a supreme eugenics type of race, one race. So you can listen to the talk, but every single thing that the faith stands for is 100% opposed to Nazism ideology. And so it's very interesting. And so this type of rise of Nazism is extremely detrimental to Europe, as well as when it mentions the word eclipsed, momentarily eclipsed the light of, and it's talking about Germany, the German Baha'i community, because that was the community. Very quickly, I'll mention this, dear John. Out of all the communities that His Holiness Abdul Baha visited, Germany was the only one that really flourished, And you'll see this in upcoming slides. The British Baha'i community, sure, it was, Abdul Baha visited there several times, but, and France, but it was, and you can read this in Abdul Baha in Egypt, the German Baha'i community became the strongest out of all of the European Baha'i community. And it was the war that really brought it, per se, to its knees, and really was, as the beloved guardian says, momentarily eclipsed it. So I could let you carry on, dear John. Thank you so much.
And for those who don't know, Nazism in full is National Socialism. That is German National Sozialismus. I don't know how to speak German, but National Socialism in English. For those of you who research what it is. The development of the German Baha'i community resumed after World War II with the assistance of the North American Bahá'ís. The first Baha'i house of worship was built in Ashgabat, Turkmenistan during 1902 through 1908 under the instruction of Abdul Baha. And that's where we were talking about this Mashghul Asghar. It was built during 1902 to 1908. So here is the plan drawing of this house of worship. It was drawn by early French Baha'i Hippolyte Dreyfus. The plan shown is of the whole lot that the building was on. The inner three rings are the pillars of the arcade, and the ring of circles are the fountains. Very beautiful indeed. Now, here is an image of the construction. Amazing, all the people seeing there. Beautiful. And this is further construction pictures. I want to also believe not just the Baha'i community, but also people who were present to assist in the building of the house of worship. And here is the house of worship after it was built. Amazing sight. Now, this is a special picture. Haji Mirza Muhammad Taqi Afnan, Vakilul Dole, in the center. He is the maternal cousin of the Bab, who largely paid for and supervised the building of the house of worship. And here is another image of this house of worship built in Ashgabat. And in the interior of the house of worship, you see these very beautiful arches, very much accented by the local architecture. You can see a women's prayer meeting here inside the Baha'i house of worship in Ashgabat. And here you have the interior dome of the Baha'i house of worship in Ashgabat. Now, I don't know why I can't see it that well here, but on the top of the dome, they usually have the greatest name placed there.
John, it's there. It's just the resolution of the picture. One of the things and one of the reasons I have all of these slides placed here is to show the flourishing of the community of Ashgabat during the trials and tribulations that was imposed on that community, that even through all of that, the community was still flourishing. And you're going to see that upcoming. So I just wanted you to get an idea of that. Excellent. Thank you, dear John. Carry on.
So within a short period, as Ehsan mentioned, Ashgabat became a flourishing Baha'i community. And here you can see the Baha'i community of Ashgabat gathered in the house of worship. Please pay also keen attention. You had the gentlemen downstairs and you had the ladies upstairs. So though the Baha'i faith obviously teaches equality, they had to pay attention to their society around them, which still was very much immersed in inequality. And as such, Baha'is did what could be as acceptable given the society that they were living in. And you can see this very beautiful. And here you have the community. In the center, you have the picture of Abdul Baha, and you have the greatest name, two other images of the greatest name with Abdul Baha in the middle. And this is the first Baha'i school of Ashgabat, circa 1930. Amazing. Look at that. Now you have an image of the International Baha'i Gathering in the grounds of the House of Worship in Ashgabat. You can see some Western women there. You can see some Western men. I see that gentleman with a hat. It looks like a British expedition hat. And you have the locals.
So, dear John, just want to make a point here. This Mashal Askar, the first Mashal Askar ever done in Ashgabat, it was a rallying cry to not only propagate the faith and to really teach. So you could see how these great teachers in the early days taught the faith and promoted the faith, and so quickly did the faith spread in this community of Ashgabat, from just a handful of individuals to, you could see the school of girls and the women and the international community here on this grounds, and just so quickly this faith get promulgated, and now you're soon going to see what happened to this community. Excellent, thank you, dear John. And one other last point: the Masjid al-Asqar was so well built. It was so well constructed and so carefully built that that the earthquake that came, it did not even collapse it, as it took out most of the whole city of Ashgabat. And you're going to see that also in upcoming slides. But I also want to stress how carefully and how well this house of worship was constructed. Thank you, dear John. Please carry on.
So a new phase of persecutions in Turkmenistan during the 1920s to 30s followed the formation of the Soviet Union, the USSR, in 1917. The central government used its new constitution and legal arguments and instruments to systematically deny the Baha'i community its basic rights. In 1934, many restrictions were imposed on the Persian Baha'i community of Turkmenistan, such as you saw the image of the school, the first school in 1930, the shutting down of the Baha'i schools, expulsion of the Baha'is from government jobs, banning the printing or importing of books, and prohibiting Baha'i marriage in the ceremony, the Baha'i marriage ceremony from occurring. And thinking on this as we were reading, to this day, you have our dear friends in countries in Central Asia who are sadly, just as you see here, expulsion of Baha'is from government jobs. That too is still happening in Central Asia, which is a shame. In 1938, the Soviet Union authorities expropriated the Baha'i house of worship in Ashgabat and leased it back to the Baha'is until 1938. So for Ehsan, if you don't mind, it says from 1938 to 1938. So for only 1 year, they were leasing it.
I have to double check on that, but it was taken from the Baha'is, and then they forced the Baha'i community to lease it back from them. But I have to check the exact dates on it and till when it was leased back. But that's a great point, dear John. Thank you so much.
Sure thing. I went to taking a look at the website about it just to see. Baha'i blog, by the way, if you look up the house of worship in Ashgabat, you can actually see a lot of other images as well there, which is really nice. So it became an art gallery before its demise in the earthquake of 1948. Interesting.
Also, there is an incredible article by Mojan Momen on the Ashgabat Baha'i community, as well as obviously on this Masjid al-Asqar in Ashgabat. And so there is, you can look it up on just Google Mojan Momen and the Ashgabat Baha'i community, and you can find this really awesome article for further reading and for further study. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. So the Great Revolt that occurred in 1936 through 1939 in Palestine was a nationalist uprising by Palestinian Arabs against the British Mandate authorities, demanding immediate self-determination and an end to the open-ended Jewish immigration policy. The beginning of the world upheaval. War, conflict, and crises have always been a major characteristic of human history. However, the dynamics of the world upheaval that started in the early 19th century was fundamentally different. As mentioned in paragraph 4, the forces released through those agitations have been gravely deranging the social, the religious, the political, and the economic equilibrium of organized society, and throwing into chaos and confusion political systems, racial doctrines, social conceptions, cultural standards, religious associations, and trade relationships on a scale so vast, so unprecedented. There's a quote here from Abdul Baha: chaos and confusion are daily increasing in the world. They will attain such intensity as to render the frame of mankind unable to bear them. Then will men be awakened. That quote has, it's causing me reason for pause. That quote has a lot of, if we just contemplate what's going around, the kind of upheavals we see around us, not just of the 1900s, but even modern day, it is causing one, if you pause and think on this, it is causing one reason to think about all the things that are going on in the world, not going wrong per se, but all the forces that are acting upon us in our lives and the changes, and again, not good or bad, but the confusion caused by these changes. I mean, we are right now in the midst of a global pandemic. So it's interesting. The winds of despair are blowing. His Holiness Baha'u'llah had discerned the signs of the convulsions and had warned humanity. The winds of despair are, alas, blowing from every direction, and the strife that divideth and afflicteth the human race is daily increasing. The signs of impending convulsions and chaos can now be discerned, inasmuch as the prevailing order appeareth to be lamentably defective. The prevailing order appeareth to be lamentably defective. I beseech God, exalted be his glory, that he may graciously awaken the peoples of the earth, may grant that the end of their conduct may be profitable unto them, and aid them to accomplish that which beseemeth their station. This is from Baha'u'llah Gleanings, pages 216 through 217. Amazing, amazing. Humanity had ignored the revelation of Baha'u'llah and his warnings. At the time the advent of divine justice was written, the massive bloodshed of World War I between 1914 through 1918 had ended, but the nations of the world were relentlessly preparing for World War II, as would occur after this in 1939 and 1945. It would end after so many long years of suffering of so many people. In paragraph 4, Shoghi Effendi refers to those crises that were afflicting a large proportion of humanity with tremendous force as the beginning of the world upheaval. The beginning. Undoubtedly, the Baha'i world community and the young institutions of the faith were bound to be affected by the adverse effects of such an upheaval. So these world-shaking forces. In paragraph 5, the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi expounds on the impact of those world-shaking forces on those who follow the Baha'i cause. They find themselves affected by the impact of these world-shaking forces. Little wonder if they find that in the midst of this whirlpool of contending passions, their freedom has been curtailed, their tenets contemned, their institutions assaulted, their motives maligned, their authority jeopardized, and their claim rejected. Ehsan, can you please define contemned, please? Ehsan, could you please define the contemned?
So, John, one of the people watching from Facebook actually brought it up. Contempt means to view or to treat with scorn.
Okay. Cool. So to view or to treat with scorn, that is a definition of contempt.
Yes.
Amazing. In paragraph 6, Shoghi Effendi refers to the spiritual significance of Germany and mentions restrictions that the Nazi regime had imposed on the Baha'i community of Germany, primarily out of misunderstandings about the purpose and function of the Baha'i faith. Intriguing, no? So this National Socialism regime had imposed on the Baha'i community of Germany these restrictions. I understand that several Baha'is actually ended up members of the victims of the Holocaust as well. Not just people who were restricted, but extinguished, their lives extinguished.
That's correct there, John. Also in the regime under the regime of Stalin, many were sent to the camps in Siberia, and you'll read up in the slides. Yeah, many Baha'is were exterminated during the regime of Nazism. Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. The development of the Baha'i faith in Europe began within a few years of the establishment of the faith in North America. London and Paris were the first centers where the Baha'i groups were formed. However, with the journeys of His Holiness Abdul Baha to Europe in 1911 and 1912, the faith was introduced to other parts of Europe. Over time, Germany became the center of the Baha'i activities, which continued after the interruption caused by World War I. His Holiness Abdul Baha has attributed great importance to Germany. In a tablet to an individual believer, he expresses no doubt that the faith of God will progress from day to day in that land, in Germany, for it will be aided by the strengthening power of the Holy Spirit and the confirmation of the Word of God. Germany, France, Italy, and Switzerland, a compilation of the Baha'i writings. And this is prepared by the Research Department of the Universal House of Justice. Abdul Baha affirms that there is much spiritual receptivity in Germany. Many souls evince a special disposition to receive the outpourings of heavenly grace. They have the capacity to become the recipients of divine teachings. Hence, some individuals are attracted to the principle of the oneness of mankind and treat all the peoples and kindreds of the earth in a spirit of concord and fellowship. He foresees that the cause of God will make great progress in Germany. It will surpass all other regions. Finally, Abdul Baha cherishes the greatest affection for the loved ones of God in Germany and fervently beseech them divine confirmation and blessing. The call of the kingdom proclaimed in that country will surely produce tremendous results in the future. And this is from that same compilation. In Abdul Baha's journey, in His Holiness Abdul Baha's journey to Europe in 1913, he spent 8 days visiting Esslingen, Stuttgart, and Bad Mergentheim in Germany, giving public talks and meeting the Baha'is. In 1916, the German Baha'is erected a public memorial in Bad Mergentheim, I believe it's Mergentheim, sorry, guys, Mergentime, in memory of Abdul Baha's visit. Despite the effects of World War I, the German Baha'i community grew to the stage that in 1923, it was able to form one of the world's first Baha'i national spiritual assemblies. And here is Abdul Baha in the center, visiting with the Baha'i community of Bad Mergentheim. And this is the community with the public memorial of Abdul Baha. Very beautiful. So we have here a historical film we're going to play.
Esslingen in Germany. In this beautiful spot, Baha'is and their friends gathered together for a summer school in 1936, a time for relaxation and learning. Amongst them was Hermann Grossmann, later to be appointed a hand of the cause in the first contingent announced by The Guardian. Also the young Mary Maxwell of Montreal, who was visiting Germany with her illustrious mother, May Maxwell, and who was to marry Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i faith, the following year, to become known as Amatul Baha, Ruhiya Khanum. She too would be elevated to the rank of Hand of the Cause of God. Many other prominent Baha'is were also present, including a young Adalbert Mühlschläg, giving a talk at one of the sessions to an audience that had overflowed beyond the small room to the outside veranda. Years later, The Guardian praised Dr. Mühlschlägl as a pillar of the administrative order in Germany and elevated him to the rank of Hand of the Cause of God. And then there was food to be prepared for the attendees, undertaken not only in a joyful spirit, but also with a keen sense of organization. The time to eat was announced, and the friends gathered for their luncheon. After the washing up, an afternoon period of outdoor relaxation. But this peace and tranquility was soon to change. The official banning of gatherings during Adolf Hitler's rise to power led to orders by the Gestapo to seize Baha'i books and literature and to imprison prominent members. Hermann Grossmann, despite being at the center of much Baha'i activity, was luckily overlooked and was thus able to appear before tribunals as a witness for the defendants, asserting the validity of the faith and its non-political nature.
The rise of the Nazis and the World War that followed significantly impeded the advancement of the European Baha'i communities. In Germany, Heinrich Himmler accused the Baha'is of having international and pacifist tendencies and banned the Baha'i faith in 1937. Afterwards, the Nazi regime engaged in systematic persecution of the Baha'is. Let's reread this again. Heinrich Himmler accused the Baha'is of having international and pacifist tendencies. Just an idea of this, pacifist tendencies is an inclination not to go to war, not to fight, and they wanted to exterminate that. That is amazing, amazing, diametrically opposed. The public memorial to Abdul Baha in Bad Mergentheim was destroyed by the Nazis. In 1939, the former members of the National Spiritual Assembly were arrested and jailed without any charges. There were more arrests in 1942, and many prisoners were sent to the concentration camps. As highlighted by the beloved Guardian in paragraph 6, These restrictions proved to be temporary. The development of the German Baha'i community resumed after World War II. The Baha'is of North America played a major role in this process as part of their second 7-year plan. In a message that the beloved guardian wrote after World War II to the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Germany in Austria, he states, "It is such a joy mingled with feelings of deep thankfulness to Baha'u'llah to be able to resume direct correspondence with the elected national representatives of a community that has achieved so much in the past for our faith, that has been so dearly loved by Abdu'l-Baha and is destined to spread, as he foretold, the light of God's sacred revelation not only in the heart of Europe, but throughout that dark, war-devastated, spiritually famished continent." Now that the shackles imposed upon that community have been removed, and its chief and central administrative institution is again vigorously functioning, a concerted, sustained, and systematic effort must be made, not only by its members, but by the rank and file of its supporters throughout that land, to expand, multiply, and consolidate the community's nascent institutions, widen considerably and rapidly the range of its literature, establish firmly and definitely in however rudimentary a form, its national headquarters in Frankfurt, situated in the heart of that country, reinforce and develop the work assigned to its national committees, revitalize its summer schools and other subsidiary institutions, maintain and develop its contact through correspondence with national and local administrative bodies throughout the Baha'i world, devise effective measures for the proclamation boldly and determinedly of the message to the masses, fortify and enrich its corporate life, and lay an unassailable foundation for its future development. And as Ehsan rightfully points out, this is one sentence, 151 words. Fact of the day. That being said,
So, dear John, I just want to make a quick point on this. So, in the slide before, in the beloved guardian here is like, I'm so happy, I'm so overjoyed that the community of Germany is finally freed and liberated from this atrocities under this regime of Nazism. This momentary eclipse is over, and now they are freed. Now, this long paragraph that you just read, the beloved guardian is pretty much saying, get to work. Get to work. Now the shackles are removed. Now let's really amp up and start massively increasing the scope and work of the community and start winning goals. And so this is where the beloved guardian is really starting to put love as well as pressure on the community to start winning the goals. There you are.
the task is immense. The opportunities are priceless and manifold. The hour is critical and challenging. The promises given by Abdu'l-Baha are clear, unmistakable, and soul refreshing. His assistance ready and unfailing. All that is required in thanksgiving for the protection vouchsafed to this community by Baha'u'llah is to arise with courage, high resolve, and clear vision, to carry out the immediate task in its entirety, and thus prepare the way for the opening of a new and still more glorious chapter in the history of the evolution of the faith in that land. I pray from all my heart for the speedy and complete realization of the high hopes I cherish for that dearly beloved, long-suffering, richly blessed community. Your true and grateful brother, Shoghi. Very, very much so. The hour is critical. we see that this time when Germany was again free for Baha'is, not all of Germany was free. Half of Germany, for that matter, was, and half of it wasn't. You had West and East Germany. You had a wall, and it was notoriously called the Berlin Wall. There was what was termed the Iron Curtain, which fell over Eastern Europe, where people who had once been able to practice their faith were no longer given that opportunity, among which those people were the people of Ashgabat, and some of which, as Shoghi Effendi pointed out, were deported, sent away, sent out of that land, kicked out. And that's actually interesting, given that the Iron Curtain, many people were trying to flee anyway. The beloved guardian mentions the persecution of the Baha'i community of Ashgabat in paragraph 7. By 1928, there were over 4,000 Baha'is in Ashgabat, the city of love. Ishq, the city of Ishq, love. During this period, the anti-religious propaganda of the government was spreading fast, and the followers of all religions in the Soviet Union were under threat of persecution. The Baha'i community started to experience these persecutions from 1928. In 1928, the secret police started to raid Baha'i meetings and arrest Baha'is as part of its anti-religious campaign initiated under Stalin. The Baha'i printing press was confiscated. Baha'i administration was suppressed. And the house of worship was expropriated, as all religious buildings were declared to be government property. Baha'is had to rent the house of worship from the government under a 5-year lease. So there we go. That's our answer. It was a 5-year lease. So from the date that Ihsan gave when they said 1938, I believe from 1938 then on. In 1929, the Baha'i schools, which by then had around 1,000 students, were closed. A large number of Baha'is were arrested in 1929. Some were imprisoned, some sent to Siberia in the gulags, and others deported to Iran. The persecution extended to taking over Baha'i businesses and expelling Baha'i students from universities. These severe restrictions continued until 1938. The lease of the house of worship was renewed in 1933. Under new regulations, the Baha'i community received full ownership of the house of worship in 1935, and restrictions on the community eased. Interesting. The house of worship was badly damaged in an earthquake that occurred in Ashgabat in 1948. Its structure was further weakened by heavy rain in the following year. As a result, it was demolished and the area was converted to a public park. So this is a message from the Universals of Justice to the National Spiritual Assemblies of the Baha'i world. Dear Baha'i friends, the whole Baha'i world will be grief-stricken at the news of the sad fate which has overtaken the Mashkul Asgar in Ashgabat, the first temple raised to the glory of Baha'u'llah. The temple was located in Turkmenistan, near the Iranian border, north of the Iranian province of Khorasan. Due to its unsafe condition resulting from earthquakes, the building has been entirely demolished and the site cleared. The building of this edifice, the only structure of its kind to be raised and completed in the timeline of Abdul-Baha, was described by the beloved guardian as a lasting witness to the fervor and the self-sacrifice of the Oriental believers. This enterprise, the guardian wrote, must rank not only as the first major undertaking launched through the concerted efforts of his followers in the heroic age of his faith, but as one of the most brilliant and enduring achievements in the history of the first Baha'i century. century that ended in 1944. The Baha'i Center in Ashgabat was founded in the days of Baha'u'llah. Already during his lifetime, preliminary steps had been adopted by the friends of that community to build in accordance with the provisions of the Most Holy Book, a Mashgul Askar. However, the project had to be postponed until 1902. At the end of the first decade of the ministry of Abdul Baha, when he initiated its construction, called on the friends in the East to offer their contributions towards the fulfillment of this goal, and personally encouraged and directed its development at every stage. The Bab's cousin, the Venerable Haji Mirza Muhammad Taqi, the Vakulu Dale, offered his total wealth towards this meritorious enterprise, established his residence in that city, and personally supervised its construction. The laying of the cornerstone of this edifice at a ceremony attended by the delegate of the Tsar, the Governor General of Turkestan, and the initial steps taken to raise this first house of worship of the Baha'i world inspired the friends in America who, in 1903, eager to demonstrate the quality of their faith, petitioned Abdul Baha for permission to erect the first Mashgul Askar of the West. In addition to the temple itself, 2 schools, one for boys and one for girls, and a pilgrim house were built. The local community and the activities of the friends throughout the provinces of Turkestan expanded and developed in stature until 1928, when the law expropriating the religious edifices was applied to this temple. However, under the terms of 2 5-year leases, the Baha'i community was permitted to continue to use the building as a house of worship. In 1938, the temple was completely expropriated and converted into an art gallery. In 1948, violent earthquakes shook the whole town, causing devastation and ruin. The building was seriously damaged. The only section which remained relatively secure was the central rotunda. Heavy yearly rains further weakened the structure to such a degree as to endanger the safety of the houses in the vicinity. It was at this point that the authorities decided to demolish the remaining edifice and clear the site. A reliable report recently received indicates, and this is in 1963, be it so, indicates that had the temple been restored to us at this point, we should have had no option but to raise the building ourselves. Please share this news with the friends, but we do not wish national assemblies, local assemblies, or individual believers to take any action. With loving greetings, the Universal House of Justice, August 25th, 1963. The persecution of the Baha'is in Iran. In paragraph 8, the beloved guardian, Shoghi Effendi, highlights the ongoing repression of the Baha'i faith in Iran, the land of its birth. Although it is the largest religious minority in the country, it has been deprived of the basic legal rights enjoined by other religious organizations such as the Zoroastrians, the Jews, and the Christians. The civil authority has not only disregarded the fact that Persian Baha'is have proved themselves to be among the most disinterested, the most competent, and the most ardent lovers of their native land, but also vilifies them for their elevated consciousness of world citizenship, a concept that is at odds with the regime's fanatically nationalistic paradigm. The persecution of the Baha'is in Iran entered a new stage when a new constitution was approved in 1906, and later with the establishment of the Pahlavi dynasty in 1925. The new constitution did not recognize the Baha'i faith as a minority religion in Iran, in contrast to the recognition given to Zoroastrianism, Judaism, and Christianity. In the past, mobs and local clergies were primarily the instigators of persecution. In the new phase, the central government became the primary initiator and executor of oppressions, using the new constitution, legal arguments, and instruments to systematically deny the Baha'i community its basic rights. In the face of persecution, the Baha'i community became more mature and openly pursued its communal and infrastructural developments. And here you have an amazing accomplishment. The Tarayat School in Tehran, August 13, 1933. Look at all these children. The Baha'is had educated girls. This was something that sadly in Iran at the time was unheard of. And the Tarbiyat system was so good that even government officials would send their own children to these schools, despite the initiatives that were taken against the Baha'is. They had such renown that they were considered among the best. And they had done things that no one else was doing, such as educating women, girls who would become educated young women that would participate productively in society in ways not known prior. The permanent closure of Baha'i schools in 1934 was a good example of this new wave of persecutions. A pronouncement issued on December 8th, 1934 by the Prime Minister of Iran ordered the closure of 2 Darayat schools and a number of other Baha'i schools. The order argued that those schools disobeyed the Ministry of Education regulations governing the operation of schools by closing on the 6th of December, 1934, which was not a national holiday. The Baha'i community were commemorating the Declaration of the Bab on December 6th as one of 9 holy days strictly observed by the Baha'i community all over the world. Accordingly, the Ministry of Education nullified the concession of the schools and ordered their permanent shutdown. Similar pronouncements were sent to other localities ordering closure of around 60 Baha'i schools. Imagine that, observing a religious holy day, closing on that holy day, and then being forced to permanently close because of observance of your holy day.
Until the end of the 19th century, educational institutions in Iran were fundamentally religious, and classes were taught by clergymen and available exclusively to men. Courses in religious schools were limited to the study of grammar, arithmetic, history, some poetry, and above all, the study of the Quran. At home, privileged youngsters were educated by tutors or teachers. Women were responsible for having children and taking care of the household. Having a formal education was seen by many as a demerit for a woman, making them difficult, intractable, maybe a person who might never be able to marry. Data from the time shows that 95% of the population was illiterate. 50 years earlier, a woman's movement begins, inspired by the poet Tahirih, one of the first women to remove the veil in front of other men and proclaim female emancipation worldwide. Eventually, Tahirih is killed by religious fundamentalists. Many see her as the pioneer and source of inspiration for the movement that would later materialize in the building of the first girls' schools in Iran. From 1899 onwards, a new educational institution emerges in Tehran, inspired by the teachings of Abbas Effendi, known as Abdul Baha. 12 years after the construction of the Tarbiyat school, which at first only allowed men, a new wing is erected, dedicated to the education of girls. Abdul Baha, like Tahereh, argued that women should receive the most perfect education, not only in the sciences and humanities, but also in the arts and in the development of physical and spiritual attributes. Under his guidance, around 50 Baha'i-inspired schools were built. To meet the needs of these new students, American teachers and educators were brought to Iran with the aim of improving the school's work. Gradually, as the school's fame grew and their academic results gained prominence, teachers and other school staff members began to be threatened and vilified by political and religious groups. Eventually, in 1934, all Baha'i schools in the country were closed. Historians point out that the higher access for women's education observed in today's Iran is the result of that development effort made more than a century ago.
Other legal constraints were forced on the Baha'is. The Baha'i community was banned from printing books, importing books, registering their marriages. Many Baha'is were expelled from their government and military positions. In 1938, it became a criminal offense to marry under a religious ceremony not offered by one of the religions recognized in the Constitution. These were just some of the measures deployed primarily to suppress the Persian Baha'i community. In paragraph 9, the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi describes the disturbances occurring in the Holy Land, preventing the flow of pilgrims, suspending various projects underway at the Baha'i World Center, endangering the safety of the local Baha'i community, challenging the neutrality of the faith, threatening to cut off all forms of communication. Despite their number, exposed positions, and lack of protection, the Baha'i holy places were miraculously protected and preserved. The incident mentioned by the beloved guardian in paragraph 9 is a reference to the revolt known as the Great Revolt that took place during 1936 through 1939 in Palestine. This was a nationalist uprising by the Palestinian Arabs against the British Mandate authorities, demanding immediate self-determination for the Palestine Arabs and an end to an open-ended Jewish immigration policy. At that time, Great Britain was entrusted with the mandate for Palestine that was to facilitate the establishment of a Jewish national home. The mandate system had been established in the early 20th century by the League of Nations for administration of non-self-governing territories as a temporary trust. Great Britain was entrusted with the mandate in July 1922 after the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire in 1922. In April 1936, the Mufti of Jerusalem called the Arabs in Palestine to observe an unlimited strike against British rule that finally ended in October 1936. The strike was supported by other forms of political protest led by urban and elitist group called the Higher Arab Community, or HAB. This was later considered as the first phase of the revolt. The second phase of the revolt, led by peasants, was violent and lasted from September 1937 until August of 1939. There are different estimates of the number of casualties in the revolt. According to British figures, more than 2,000 Arabs were killed in combat. 108 were hanged, and 961 died as the result of terrorist activities. The Arab sources give an estimate of 19,972 casualties for the Arabs, of which 14,760 were wounded. The German town that had the monument re-erects the monument. The new memorial was unveiled earlier this month on April 7th, 2007 by Mayor Lothar Barth, accompanied by Bahman Suluki, and this person, Bahman, is a representative of the Baha'i community of Germany. Quote, Bad Mergentheim can be proud that Abdul Baha came here, the mayor said at that ceremony. The Baha'i faith is one of the 6 major world religions. There is no other way to put it, and this should be honored accordingly. And this is what it says. And that is it for today. So let me stop sharing. Actually, we have our closing prayer, but if we have reflections on what we just went over,
very good.
Very in-depth.
Son, you look a bit different today. You've changed your name as well. Are you guys like taking turns to present, or is it?
No, Ehsan, he's here. You see him as one of the participants. Yeah, he's here.
Oh yeah. Good.
Thank you very much.
Very well presented, dear John. Excellent job.
This was a very weighty session, very, very substantial. And that video, dear Ehsan, that you included in this beautiful presentation, thank you so much for doing all this. That video, where can we find it? That was created by the Persian media services. Where can we find that video, that very beautiful video about the Tarbiyat school?
It's on YouTube. I'll send it to you, dear John.
Thank you. Thank you greatly. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
So I think that given the length of time we spent today, it is a good idea that we reflect on this and we say a prayer to strengthen us as we leave our gathering today. What do you all think?
Prayer.
All right. Let me put up the prayer for the southern states. I'm going to share it, and whoever would like to read this, please. Alice, if you would like to read this.
Can you make it okay. Oh my God, thou seest me in my lowliness and weakness, accomplished with the greatest undertaking, determined to raise thy word among the mass and to spread thy teaching among thy people. How can I succeed unless thou assist me with the breath of the Holy Spirit. Help me to triumph by the host of thy glorious kingdom, and shower upon me thy confirmation, which stones can change, which stones can change a gnat into an eagle, a drop of water into a river and a sea, and an atom into light and sun. O my Lord, assist me with thy triumph and of effective might, so that my tongue may utter thy praise and attribute among all people, and my soul overflow with the wine of thy love and knowledge. Thou art the omnipotent, the doer of whatsoever thou willest. Abdul Baha.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a beautiful week ahead, and please, you know that this is available if you have a friend that you would like to study this with. This is available again on YouTube and Facebook, the previous recordings. And if you want your friend to be a part of this Zoom session, you can go to www.clearwaterbaha'is.org, and you can click on the 3 p.m. session, the link for it, and register, and you will receive email updates for the Zoom session. I hope you all have a very beautiful week ahead, and a reflective one at that, on the subject that we have just covered today.